Good morning, Bonnie. We'll wait a couple more minutes to see if anybody else decides to arrive. So this morning we are going to talk about the gunas and the modes of material nature. So a lot of times we ask, why am I the way that I am? And it's always fun to explore that from an Ayurvedic perspective as to why we behave the way it is that we behave. And a lot of that has to do with the gunas, which are known as the modes of material nature. So I'm going to wait a couple extra minutes and we'll be back. So I'm just going to begin. So welcome everybody to today's empowerment talk on the gunas, the modes of material nature. So in Ayurveda, we have these three qualities. So the word guna actually means quality. And they are actually linked directly to our psychological development and our psychological behavior. And so a lot of folks will ask, why is it I am the way that I am? And despite the fact that you have unique characteristics for yourself, we also universally share some of these qualities. And in Ayurveda, they're known as the gunas. So our personalities are both unique and shared amongst our fellow humans. And these qualities, how they manifest within us is a very unique situation versus having universal qualities. So we share certain aspects of it, and then the qualities themselves, how they land within us, is specific to us based on our Jyotish birth chart. So the three gunas, and I'm going to write this in the chat, are sattva, and that is known as consciousness. The second one is rajas, and that is known as activity. And the third is known as tamas, which is known as stability. And as we go through our work together over the next 108 days, or actually it's a little bit less than that because we're now officially at day 14, which is wonderful, or actually day 15, pardon me. So each of these qualities are linked to what is known as the doshas in our bodies. We're not going to go into the doshas today, but rather just talk about these universal qualities because we go from the universal and then eventually it comes down and it allows it to be very specific on the physical level. So everything we do and how we behave operate according to these three qualities. So there are times when we are in a state of very elevated consciousness and we are doing things that are associated with being very aware, conscious of our actions, what's around us. And it is actually a very peaceful place because when we have heightened awareness, then we are in a state of balance and of consciousness. Then there is rajas, which is known as activity. And this is when things are in motion, when they're in action. So there are times when we're very aware. There are times that we are just moving forward and being in an active state. And that has a lot to do with our daily activities. Then there is tamas, which is being stable. So it's the opposite of movement. And it's not consciousness, but rather it is a state of being very stable, being very grounded, etc. So we've got activity, we've got groundedness, and then we have our awareness or our consciousness. And so these also have a balanced aspect and an imbalanced aspect. And so how does that manifest in our personalities? So with sattva, when we are in a balanced, conscious way, then we are aware and there is goodness, wholeness, and peace associated with it. When sattva is imbalanced, there is fear, anxiety, restlessness, and worry. With rajas, this activity state, when rajas is in a balanced condition, we are active, we are creative, and we initiate change in a very conscious and aware state. We're not all over the place. But when rajas is in an imbalanced state, it can result in being angry, aggressive, jealous, and sometimes can even result in really extreme measures like hatred, which can be not particularly positive. So those are the qualities of an imbalanced state of rajas. Tamas, on the other hand, is very much that grounding nature. When it's balanced, we feel stable, we're grounded, we're firm. We have this state of awareness, but we're very firm in what it is that we believe, that we stand for, etc. When tamas is in an imbalanced state, it can become very lethargic. It can be selfish. It can get very clingy, codependent, attached, and in some cases it can be very passive, and not necessarily in a good way. Passive can, there's sometimes where being passive is okay, where it's like, just let it go, not really that important. But passive can also be something that we just let the world pass us by, we don't engage, etc. And it can become inert in a lot of ways. So think of ways in which you behave, and these gunas are things that are happening on a daily basis. We can go from a state of pure consciousness, especially in the morning when we wake up. If you wake up early and you do your meditation and your pranayama practices, we can be in a very aware, conscious state where we are connected to the universe, where we're connected to the divine. And so sattva is that quality that manifests itself. But again, if there is just too much sattva, it can result in things like anxiety, that can build up, and our mind gets distracted. With rajas, we can go through rajasic states throughout our day. I mean, just think about your day. When you're interacting with people, whether it's your family or your colleagues, etc., we can go from like moving things forward to also like very frustrated. Just think of rush hour traffic, where it's like, ugh, why isn't this moving? We get very frustrated and angry as a result of that. And then we can go through tamasic states throughout the day. When it's balanced, we feel very stable, we feel grounded, etc. But think about if you receive unpleasant news in your life, how that can turn into becoming lethargic or even attached. Like I feel like I have to. I develop a codependency, especially if I receive news that I'm not really willing to hear. We want to like figure it out, and we get very attached to something. And we can also become very selfish. And all of these qualities, to be very clear, like one's not good and one's not bad. It has nothing to do with good or bad, but rather really has to do with how we behave in the world. What's fascinating about all of this is that we all universally connect with these. There are days when we're conscious, there are days when we're just kind of spinning out of control with our minds. There are days when we have a lot of activity that is moving in a positive direction, and there are days where that too much activity can turn into aggressive or angry behavior, as well as in our tamasic state, sometimes we can feel very stable, but then if the ground or the carpet gets pulled out from underneath us, we then get somewhat fearful and become attached. And then it becomes all about us, like you have to solve my problem kind of thing. What's fascinating about all of it is that these modes are also attached to our nervous system. So the nervous system is the system which the body, it's the physical system by which our personality manifests. So the personality that we develop through these gunas, which are ever changing and happening all the time, have a direct impact on our nervous system, and specifically the autonomic, the sympathetic, and the parasympathetic. So the autonomic nervous system, which is the nervous system that things happen that we don't have to consciously ask it to do. So our heart beats, our lungs experience respiration, the circulatory system is pumping blood through our bodies. We don't have to tell our bodies to do those things. So the autonomic nervous system allows for things to unfold in an automatic way. And so the state or the guna of sattva is associated with that. And if you think about sattva being something having to do with consciousness, we are unconscious that these things are happening in our bodies. Like if we sit and we think about it, say, wow, that's pretty interesting. I don't have to get up and tell my heart to start beating or my lungs to start experiencing respiration. The body does that naturally. And so it is sort of the ultimate state of consciousness where the autonomic nervous system is just doing its thing because that's what it's supposed to do to physically, mentally, emotionally, and energetically keep you alive. Then we have rajas, which is associated with the sympathetic nervous system, or that fight or flight. So if we think of rajas as activity, and we know that the balanced state for rajas is active and creative and initiates change, but the imbalanced state can be angry, aggressive, jealous, or even take into account things like hate, that it is associated with the sympathetic nervous system as it relates to fight or flight. So fight or flight is very much associated with activity, the activity of the mind. Some energy or some thought or some process or even something physical is coming at me and I'm responding. So rajas is associated with the sympathetic nervous system. And then we have tamas, which is associated with the parasympathetic nervous system that has everything to do with resting and digesting. And so, if we think about that, tamas is that balanced state in an ideal situation, it's a balanced state in a balanced environment. And so it's firm and it's grounded. Obviously, when it's imbalanced, it can become lethargic and selfish and codependent and attached, etc. But the parasympathetic nervous system, being that rest or digest, gives us the opportunity to be able to take in the experience and also consciously process it. And that is what the parasympathetic nervous system does. So, these three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, known as the modes of material nature, and these modes of material nature are also discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. They're also discussed in the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. So these are 5,000-year-old concepts that go from the universal and come down into our physical being on the personal level. And it does correspond to how it is that we behave. Why am I the way that I am? Why are my behaviors manifesting in the way it is that they manifest? And a lot of that has to do with, when we think of it on a personal level, how they manifest are the direct result of the influence that the external environment has on us. And this is why we do these 8 simple practices every single day, because they allow us to get into a routine and a pattern that, when things from the outside come in and they influence us, that it can indeed be a stabilizing factor, that we don't have these major swings in balance and imbalance as it pertains to sattva, rajas, and tamas and our personality. So I hope that was interesting to you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Jai Bhagwan.